days, but Casaragi's got experience, as you say, dealing with Balotelli. Under 21s, he got sent off in one game for the under 21s, overslept and actually missed a flight to Trieste with the team. So Balotelli up to the old tricks again. So I had to ask him if he'd experienced any fireworks incidents in Mario's hotel room before any of the international games.
No. Although his room was always a bit on the messy side, I have to say nothing like that ever happened. You have to remember I played with Gaza, who really was mad. He was certainly a very different character to Mario. But Mario's a boisterous guy, so maybe it was just down to luck that I escaped his antics. At that age, many of the guys are on their laptops or playing PlayStation. He was always on YouTube watching clips of Ibrahimovic. Ibra was his point of reference. In fact, a lot of the mannerisms that you see with Mario when he's playing are the same as Ibrahimovic, such as not celebrating when he scores. I said to Mario, stop watching Ibra. You are your own person. But it's normal for youngsters to imitate the great players they see.
If I think of a player who's a great player, be he Messi, be he, Pele, I can close my eyes and think of a moment which reminds me who he is. Can you think of a moment in your time working with Mario that sums Mario up, that's the perfect Mario moment? It may have been a goal or something he said or how he behaved. Is there a moment which is pure Mario?
Yes, during training sessions there are times I've seen him do things that I've never seen anyone do before. And remember, I've played with Roberto Baggio, Zola and lots of the very best. That's when you realise his incredible potential.
That's just worth sort of rolling around the mouth like a good wine, isn't it? He has seen do things that Zola and Baggio haven't done.
Yeah.
This is Casaragi, who played for the Italian national team.
This is when it started spooking me, when I started speaking to some of the former players and the coaches that had worked him at the top level. And I mean, I watched Balotelli and I see him and I think, well, he's very good and he can do this and he can become a great player. Then I listen to people who've watched him closely for a long time and they talk about him at a totally different level again. They talk about him as someone who could be one of the world's great players. Now, that's fair enough coming from his agent, Mino. We expect that from him. He's going to say that anyway. Although I do say he does believe that, Mino. That's not just a line from him. But when you start hearing it from the likes of Casaragi and some of the other guys I talk to, your ears prick up a wee bit and you think to yourself, well, wait a minute. He may have something that we don't know yet.
This is why Mancini and City have tolerated the circus that has surrounded Balotelli for the last 18 months, because Mancini keeps telling them, stick with him and we will get the benefit from it. The one thing Mancini doesn't want to do is cut his losses, let him go back to Italy and someone else get the benefit of a grown-up Mario Balotelli, because Mancini thinks he will be a world superstar.
To actually, as you say, mention him in the same breath as Baggio and Zola. And if Baggio and Zola, two Italians, I mean, you're talking close to the Holy Trinity.
Baggio almost won a World Cup on his own, didn't he, in America? Paolo, I just want to bring you in here, then we're going to get to Luca Vialli, because it's very much on this subject. How Balotelli is regarded in Italy at the moment as a player?
Oh, he's regarded very highly. I just wanted to throw in quickly on that conversation that was just happening, that Samuel Eto'o, when he'd only been at Inter for his first year, said this kid Balotelli is the strongest young player I've ever seen. Now, bear in mind, Samuel Eto'o's just come from Barcelona and seeing Lionel Messi and La Masia, so again, that gives you some idea. But he's very highly thought of in Italy, and he's really supposed to be one of the pillars of this new Italian national team under Cesare Prandelli, who said right at the beginning, I want to base my national team around Cassano and Balotelli. So, he's highly thought of. He's someone who they're expecting a lot from.
Wow, that's going to be lively. Cassano and Balotelli, isn't it? Right, Chelsea fans will enjoy this. The great Gianluca Vialli. You were off to see him just before the Milan-Arsenal game last week.
Well, as I say, we had lunch and then went straight on to meet him. Well, everyone, as we've seen, I talked to in Italy, was when I thought at the time pretty much overboard on Mario, but this was the top players and coaches that I was talking to, but I thought, go one above that, talk to an absolute true great of Italian football. So I asked Luca Vialli, can Balotelli be the best?
It's not a complete player yet, but that doesn't worry me, because I'm sure that very soon he will be one of the top strikers in the world. I'm sure about that. But he needs to grow as a man as well and become a bit more mature.
I think that's the thing that surprised a lot of people in England. Many people I've talked to in Italy have said the same thing. He can be one of the great players in the world. And you believe that is the case?
Yes, because I saw him recently at Stamford Bridge playing for Manchester City versus Chelsea. It was just before Christmas, and I thought he played a game that I would personally have been proud of if I could have played the same way week in, week out. He was fantastic. He was working so hard for the team. He was playing as a centre forward, sort of leading the team up front, running the channels, putting the defenders under pressure, always available to receive the ball, and then he's got great technique and great creativity. He's fast. I think he can really be one of the top strikers in the world within the next 2 or 3 years.
I think the consideration most of us have is the personality. You know, is it just about growing up, or is he an unusual personality? A lot of British people see him as eccentric. Some would say mad, but some say eccentric.
Well, I think it's not easy to be Mario Balotelli because he's a black guy who grew up in Italy, and Italy is not England in that sense. We're not racist, but we are not really a cosmopolitan, multiracial country yet. So I think for Balotelli it wasn't easy, and also he was abandoned by his parents when he was very little. So I'm sure that he's got something that he's got to deal with in terms of personality and emotions, and he's still very, very young. So at 22, being a young man, having to do a difficult job under a tremendous amount of pressure, you are likely to make mistakes. But I don't like calling them mistakes. I like calling them a learning curve. And this is what Balotelli needs to understand. It's okay to do something a bit silly, a bit mad sometimes, questionable, but you've got to move on and every year become a more mature person and try to make less things that people can talk about. I think that Mario suits the English style perfectly. What he needs to understand, in my opinion, and this is what I will tell him the day I see him personally, is that he might think that it's cool to do something mad sometimes, or react, or kick an opponent, or argue with the referee. In my opinion, it's much cooler if you don't do that and you show that you are strong and nothing really upsets you, and you, despite what happens on the pitch, despite what your opponents do to you, you get on with the game. This is what I think is very cool. And I think that sometimes Mario misunderstands popularity with admiration. I don't think that he wants... I mean, you don't have to be popular. You've got to be admired. If you want to be popular, you do something silly. If you want to be admired, you do the right things. But he's got a big heart. I know that from people who knows him better than I do. But there's no doubt that he's a clever guy. I mean, look at the way he speaks English. He's been there only a bit longer than a year, and he seems as if, he was born there. And he's really a citizen of the world. And this is a great quality that he has.
I know this is a programme about Balotelli, but it's great to hear Vialli again.
Yeah.
I miss him in our game. Don't you, Ian, from our point of view? Really miss Vialli.
I tell you what, that is absolutely blown me away listening to that. That guy should be a life coach. Seriously. That is, of all the great things we've heard in the last hour, that is the one that I'm going to take away from this show, because I tell you what, David Platt and Roberto Mancini should get on the phone to their old mate, get him over here in time to look after Balotelli, because that is absolutely perfect. Like you said before.
Followed by England against Wales from 4
on 5 Live.
Welcome back to the Surreal Mario Balotelli here on 5 Live Sport. The Daily Mail's Northern correspondent Ian Ladyman is with me. Pat Nevin has been investigating the real character that is Balotelli. And joining us from Tampa, former Manchester City legend Rodney Marsh. Rodney, good evening to you from Salford.
Good evening, guys.
What do you make of Balotelli? Balotelli the player, Balotelli the character as well, Rodney?
Yeah, well, I've been listening to the programme for the past 20, 30 minutes, and with all due respect to your panel, it seems to me, guys, that a lot of what you said is what is wrong with Balotelli. He needs to find out the difference between being popular and being admired. He needs to stop missing parades. He needs to stop kicking people on the pitch. He needs to stop doing this, and a lot of it has been negative. I think Balotelli is close to being a genius footballer. I know he's young. I've seen him play a dozen times. I saw him play in the America pre-season over here, and he was absolutely brilliant. And I think instead of looking at all the things that he does wrong, I think I'd like to concentrate on all the things that he does great, and he does a lot of things great.
Yeah. Rodney, we shouldn't be too unfair on you because you've only had the last 20 or 30 minutes, mate. The first hour or so was so positive of getting the guys.
Good.
Honestly, we had to give some balance somewhere, because there are a lot of people who think different things about him. But it's amazing you using that word genius, because that's the thing that's been getting me all the way through. The people that I've talked to, from Casaraghis and Viallis and players that, even talked to Lippi, and everyone's saying the same thing. This could be one of the greatest players we'll see.
Yeah, it's difficult to argue with it. I know he's only a young player, but you'll know this, Pat. When you look at footballers, most footballers play football with their head. They understand the game, they understand what they've got to do, they understand the consequences. I think Balotelli plays with his heart, and that's all he does. He's natural, he's off the cuff, he does what he feels right at any particular time. And I think to stop him from doing that would take away from his game. I absolutely think he's a wonderful player, and I, for one, just love to watch him play football.
So you think, let him play with his instinct?
I think it's very, well, yeah, definitely that, but I think it's very difficult to put yourself in Mancini's shoes. He's got to balance a squad of players. He's got fantastic talent. He's got other forward players. Aguero is a brilliant player. He's got Dzeko in the team who scores. He's got Tevez possibly coming back. So Mancini will know what he's got to do. But I, for one, I want to just say this: it's very hard to pigeonhole a player like Balotelli, because sometimes a player comes along that is so brilliant that you can't put him into a pigeonhole, and you've got to let him play, and you've got to let him play with his heart. And I tell you one thing, guys, if there's a game and it's 0-0 and it's against Manchester United and all the marbles are on the game and you get a penalty in the last minute, do you know who I won't taking that penalty?
Yeah.
Wow. And the whole planet, not just Man City.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting you say that, Ronnie, because we've sort of, those of us who watched the game rather than played it like you and Pat, you're talking about penalties there and it's sort of sang-froid. We were always told, weren't we? Pick your spot and stick to it. When he took that penalty against Tottenham, it was almost as if he was actually waiting for Friedel to commit himself before he thought, well, you've done that. I know exactly where I'm going to put it now. That's how calm he can be.
Well, I tell you one thing. I played at a very high level, as Pat did. And I tell you, to do what he did, I took penalties. To walk up to that ball, cool as anything, knew exactly what he wanted to do, and put the ball away. That, to me, is a stroke of genius. And that's why I just think you have to let Balotelli play. And there's one more thing I want to say about what Vialli said. And that is that he's a spontaneous player. He is. Do you know the moment for me when I thought Balotelli understood everything about the English game and about football? Was when he scored the goal against Manchester United away from home at Old Trafford, and he pulled up his shirt and it said, "Why always me?"
Yeah.
That to me spoke volumes.
In actual fact, you're not the first person to talk about, everything that you've said there. Similar things have been said by people who just want the beauty of the game, the love of the game. And I'm one of these people who's slightly torn, because I always wanted to be a good pro, but always wanted to have my heart playing the game more than anything else. And to be honest, my heart always won over my head. And that's the way it should be. But it's not the English way generally. Well, it hasn't been since, maybe back in your day when you had Stan Bowles and you had Georgie Best.
Well, there's a lot of players that in the years gone by, Peter Osgood was another example, and these players, what happens, Pat, and you know this, they get themselves into trouble. They get themselves sent off. They miss parades. George Best missed games. These are the genius type mentality that makes the player on the field what he is off the field. And if you try to take that away from these people, you're